Canada recognizes the State of Palestine.
Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking at the United Nations just last hour, saying Canada's recognition of a Palestinian state is part of a coordinated international effort to preserve the possibility of a two-state solution. Carney first signaled his plan to do this earlier this summer. Canada's move was accompanied by similar announcements from France, the UK, Australia, and Portugal. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand joins me now from the United Nations. Nice to see you, Minister. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, JP.
Why is Canada taking this step now?
The viability of a two-state solution is quickly eroding, and it has been Canada's long-standing policy to see two states living side by side in peace and security for both Israelis and Palestinians. And we are joining an international effort with like-minded countries, the UK, France, Australia, and over 140 others who believe that a two-state solution is necessary because the viability of two states existing side by side is quickly eroding. I will say, JP, that being here on the ground at the United Nations, it is very much the view that we need to seek peace. We need a ceasefire. We need Hamas to lay down its weapons, and we need the hostages returned. And that is unanimously felt amongst countries here. I attended a dinner last night to discuss this very point. And again, I'll be meeting with my G7 ministerial colleagues right after I finish this interview.
So the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not among the countries that is supporting this move that you're speaking about there. He said yesterday that there will be no Palestinian state, and he was quite definitive. No Palestinian state on his watch. In fact, he said Israel is actually going to push ahead with its settlements in the West Bank, and they're going to press ahead with this E1 settlement that is going to surround East Jerusalem. What value is Canada's recognition of Palestine if Israel is rejecting it outright? You don't have a willing partner.
So let's be clear that the state of Israel, the government in Israel, to be distinguished from the Israeli people, the Israeli government is methodically eroding the likelihood and possibility of a two-state solution by the very moves that you are referring to. The E1 proposal, for example, the annexation of the West Bank, the view that the people of Gaza are not going to have a state to reside in. In fact, there are quotations not only from Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also from certain of his ministers, Minister Smotrich, Minister Ben-Gvir, both of whom have been sanctioned by Canada, stating that there needs to be the elimination of Palestine. And so this increases the urgency, actually. There is a methodical, systematic view that the state of Palestine should not exist. And so this underpins the moves that over 140 countries are making to recognize the state of Israel, to preserve the viability of a two-state solution.
I mean, there's more than 200 Israeli settlements as there is right now. More than 700,000 people live in Jerusalem and the West Bank. And settlements is kind of a misnomer. It's not Bedouin tents in the desert, right? These are suburbs. These are communities that look like, Scottsdale, Arizona or something like it. So, how, and they're planning more now, as we've just been discussing, where would an actual Palestinian state be if more and more of West Bank territory is in the hands of Israelis?
Well, I want to make clear, first and foremost, that Canada has sanctioned extremist settlers, and we voiced our opposition to the E1 settlements as a violation of international law. In terms of the territorial boundaries of the state of Palestine, indeed, the Montevideo Convention of the 1930s set down 4 requirements for statehood, one of which was the territorial boundaries. Canada was not a signatory to the Montevideo Convention. However, we do believe that there is an overarching reason to recognize the state of Palestine now in order to preserve a long-standing Canadian government policy over decades and decades. Canadian governments of all stripes have supported the idea of a two-state solution. And so the recognition today is really a culmination of those decades of Canadian government policy to ensure that a two-state solution remains viable while there is an attempt to eradicate it.
The Canadian government has said Palestine must be democratic and it must be demilitarized. Who is responsible for seeing that through? Is there a role for Canada in that effort to make it more democratic and to demilitarize it?
Most definitely, there is a role. I've been speaking with the Palestinian Authority on a weekly basis since we made our initial announcement in July. And I spoke with President Abbas following up on his letter to Prime Minister Carney recently to emphasize that the promises made relating to democracy and democratic reforms, the promises made relating to demilitarization and other reforms, including the absolute absence of Hamas in any Palestine governance, has to be brought forward, has to be achieved before there's going to be normalization of relations. And I want to stress the importance of returning the hostages. And that is absolutely fundamental to our position. I was also speaking with other representatives, other foreign ministers here at the United Nations today. And our view is that we need to see progress. We need to see reforms from the Palestinian Authority before we continue down the path of normalization. And so that's the work that we are undertaking now. This is a step-by-step process, but the step of recognition, while not a panacea, does support the principle of self-determination of peoples upon which international law and territorial integrity in particular are based.
I spoke to the Israeli ambassador to Canada yesterday, and he said that Hamas is rejoicing at this decision. He says it rewards terrorists and the people who carried out the brutal October 7th attack. I want your reaction to that, but do you also understand why Israelis are concerned that this sort of recognition could embolden Hamas and its allies?
Of course, I understand the viewpoint. We do not agree with it. In fact, we don't want to give Hamas the cards. We want to say boldly and bluntly that Hamas is a terrorist entity within Canadian law. Hamas should have and will have no role in the future governance of the state of Palestine, and that Hamas must lay down its weapons and demilitarize. There is no room for Hamas in the views of the countries with whom I've been speaking and who have decided to recognize Palestine. No room at all, JP. And the view that this emboldens Hamas is simply not in keeping with the very reason that we are going forward now. The state of Palestine should not be contingent on what Hamas decides should happen with that territory. Hamas has weakened the Palestinian people, as has the conflict that has raged on. But let's be clear, October 7th, 2023 was a terrorist attack, and we need to address that point as well as the recognition point to which I'm speaking right now.
All right, let's leave it there. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand, thanks for coming on. Nice to see you, Minister.
Thank you so much. Take good care.